my name is Joseph Carlson, and this is episode 31 of The Grief of Politics. I'm here with Avin Carroll.
Hi.
Yeah, and we're doing this in person. We're, we got everything set up. I had some equipment just lying around, and I figured we would do it in person. This is probably going to be the thing we're going to do now. We talked about other cameras and stuff, but I don't, tight space. But we'll see how it goes. But for the 25 people at the time of recording, maybe 28 that watched this last time, thank you so much. And this week was my week to pick, and we're going to talk about woke. What is woke? We really want to define it. We will talk about the politics of it later, but I think you and I have not different, but we had, I think originally a few months ago we had like very different ways that we would use woke maybe, and so I want and you hear about it more and more as the election is heating up, and so yeah. So I think I'm woked out, I think is what I'm trying to say. Especially DeSantis, somebody counted.
Interestingly enough, one of the articles that you chose, the author of it also said that they were done with woke.
Yeah. Well, I agreed with them. That's why I picked the article. Yeah. But also, somebody pointed out, we may have to do an episode on DeSantis since he's running for president. Yep. But he gave like a 2-minute speech, and he used woke like 6 or 7 times in that speech. And it was like, is there a quote? Like he has to hit so many per minute to hit the voters and stuff like that. So we used a Wisecrack YouTube video called Woke, Deep or Dumb, I believe. I got yes. And then we read an article. I can't remember the name of it. It was from Palm Beach Herald, I think.
Palm Beach Post.
Yeah, the Palm Beach Post. What does it mean to be woke, and why does Florida Governor Ron DeSantis want to stop it? And then, Salon said, "Why am I sick of being woke?" And it seemed like the author said he was African American in that, like he was talking about.
Definitely sounded like it. Yep.
Yeah, and so your initial impressions of the whole woke thing, because I have changed my beliefs on woke.
Okay.
What about you?
It lines up with my understanding of it, right? The original intention and purpose. I didn't realize that the phrase woke had been used as long as it has. The history of the word used in the way it's used, it's intended to be used by the people who use it the way it's intended to be used.
The Wisecrack video really went into that, and I'd heard some of that, but not all of that.
Right.
And so
I think it showed up the first time in some publication in like 1918 or something like that.
The 20s, yeah.
Again in the 1930s at some point, and then started becoming more common in African American communities sometime around the 1970s.
Yeah.
And then finally took off really in the common lexicon.
Like the 60s.
No, in the like 2008, 9, 10 era range. Maybe it's 2012. It really kind of entered the public sphere.
Right.
I don't remember who it was. I think it was Trayvon Martin after Trayvon Martin was shot.
Yes,
and
probably.
Zimmerman got away with it.
Yeah, I think so. Probably after
I shouldn't say got away with it. Zimmerman was
acquitted. Right.
And the community at large felt that he got away with murder.
The judicial system acquitted him. The public did not.
Correct. So from there, it kind of enters the lexicon. And my understanding of how it was used before makes perfect sense. I was young enough that I was kind of in the know as it was entering the common lexicon. The whole idea of stay woke or stay awake to what is happening and the injustices that are happening in our society is kind of the common idea. As African American communities were protesting the killings of seemingly innocent black people all around the country.
Yeah.
That became very, very common.
In their communities and around the country, yeah.
And through the advent of social media, more, as I will label them, social justice warriors, because, I am the red proponent in this conversation.
We wore shirts that match, and the mic things, these came in a pack, so I got lucky.
Hey, perfect.
Yeah.
Right, so as we're talking about that idea of the social justice warriors kind of also attached to it. And I don't want to use it that way too pejoratively. It's just the phrase that comes to my mind at the moment, just because it's the activist groups that are out really clung to that phrase because I think it really fit the emotion of the time. And then, of course, since then, we've seen, is my understanding of it, kind of how it's being used now by DeSantis and the majority of conservatives. And the Wisecrack video actually shows a whole clip of a bunch of different, conservative news organizations.
Like Fox News and Newsmax, all those people,
right. Using it more pejoratively. making fun of people who are just left. Like, if you are left, you are woke.
Yeah.
And I don't think the majority
And
of
that's
people
bad.
that were left would agree with that. Yes, and in conservative circles, if you're woke or left, that's bad, which we've discussed at length in my own personal, like, our politics have become so adversarial, it drives me up the flipping wall. I hate it.
Yeah, it's frustrating because it's like I think that what I thought was interesting researching all this is I've noticed it, but like I think the Salon article talked about it, about the idea that everything changes, right? So obviously, but language especially, like there's always a backlash. So
Yep.
woke was originally a positive thing. Hey, stay woke, stay aware, like you said.
Yeah.
And then now it's like, oh, you're woke, like that's wrong. Even terms. I'm trying to think of another. Not even woke. It was. I mean, it just seems like there's always a backlash to that. Like initially, it's a positive thing, and then you weaponize it. Like you just said, social justice warrior. That idea of like, yeah, I'm a social justice warrior. Like I try to be aware, or
Yeah.
cognizant. And then there's a turnaround of like, oh, it's an SJW. You're like, okay. Well, I always thought it was something like, yes, I do care about the environment and people. Whatever.
And I think it, by and large, the theme in the Salon article really kind of hits it on the head, right? It starts off, it is a group of people who actually care, who are using the phrase to define their feelings and emotions and where they're at in their state. And then it gets grabbed and by other people who are like, oh, that's really cool. And then it becomes trendy and I want to fit in and I want to
Right.
match the group of people that I associate with. But really, it's just virtue signaling at that point.
Yeah.
And
No, I mean, it
that
is.
drives people nuts. 'Cause
Like-
it's like, you don't care. You don't know what's really going on. You're just using that phrase so you look good.
Yeah, and we talked about that a lot with like corporate stuff. Like, you and I have no illusions about like corporations during Pride Month showing a pride flag, like Coca-Cola saying we're with you. It's like, are you like again?
Really? Right?
Yeah, like you and I said, the best reading of that situation is there's people in those organizations that are part of those communities that want to be seen, and they go to their higher ups and they say, okay, we're going to do a campaign. But the knock-on effect is the company's like, oh, maybe we'll get some more scratch for this. And the worst reading of it, the abhorrent reading of it is we're doing this just for money.
Right.
So we're going to do it. We're just going to cash in, and we don't care after Pride Month, about gay people or whatever.
Right.
We'll write up a statement that says we do, but we really don't. Like you and I talked about it on the phone, and I heard more about this ancillary to gaming. The new Lord of the Rings set with Magic the Gathering.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the art, a lot of the like Aragon, like a lot of the people in Lord of the Rings in this are depicted as African American, and it made a lot of people mad.
Yep.
But what it was the main artist has literally come out and said, I'm an African American. I want to see myself in fantasy. So we've seen these characters for whatever. I'm going to do this. I'm going to make it my own. And so that was their design thing. So that's, in my opinion, the best reading of that, when that person, that artist, could go to the company and go, this is a vision I have. Now, again, the company could be doing the thing going, well, we're going to get a little extra scratch from this because it's going to show how woke we are and everything.
Right.
But the best reading of it is everybody high up said, no, this is a great idea. I love this art. Like, in fact, me looking at the art, I'm like, this is really good art for these characters, like this is cool.
Right.
But there's a section of the crap internet, the bad internet, that's like,
You mean the internet?
yeah, the 90-10 split of like the good part of the internet and the bad. Yeah, so I mean, it's I think a terrible. You're kind of stuck in a terrible thing if you're a company. Like there's companies out there that do care, but they're like, the moment we put something out for Pride Month, we're gonna be. And also this another aside with gaming. I listen to a lot of gaming podcasts, and Pride Month, African American History Month. There's a lot of people crossing the streams for his guests and everything, and you see a lot of African Americans on shows that wouldn't normally be on during African American History Month, which is fine, but a lot of them have called out, like, how come my phone dries up at the end of June? Like you lost my email in July. There's only one host I know of that perpetually, he'll get people from all different walks of life, and he has them on through the whole year. And so I think that's incredibly commendable because he likes their voices and likes having them on.
Right.
And but yeah, that could be like, oh, you're woke. It's Women's Rights Month or Women's History Month, so we're gonna have nothing but women on. But then after that month, nothing. Like we're not gonna have any more female hosts on.
Which comes back to the part of it that just drives us bonkers, right? That the part that just sits uncomfortable in our guts where we may not be able to ever put our finger on it, but really, honestly, it's just that like we don't like the disingenuous, kind of fraudulent, I want to look good because it's expected of me. I don't want to look bad behavior. We want the authentic representation of who you are. So, right, like if you're a company who really doesn't care who spends money with you, like I don't care if you're trans, gay, lesbian, cis, straight. I don't care if you're African American or Native American, or if you're visiting from, Botswana. Just spend your money with me. I don't really give a crap.
Yeah.
So
and be nice to each other.
You don't need to put the pride flag out there to do that. You just have your brand and just be your brand.
Yeah,
and be authentic.
That's another thing I think with that host I brought up. He never brings it up. He just has guests on from all over, Right. But when those guests, those African American guests, are like, "Hey, man, what's going on in July?" Like nothing. It is more galling. Like again, another side with gaming. Jeff Keighley, who ran a summer game festival in LA, had a big conference and he had developers up there. They were showing off games. They had heads of studios up there. Yep. No women were up there. And right afterwards, a bunch of podcasters was like, "Hey, man, women do develop games. You think you could have maybe one up there?" And one of the panels I was listening to, the host was male, and there was a couple women, and he goes, "Do you guys notice anything about the presentation?" And they're like, "Gee, why would you bring that up at all? Like, no reason that we, I think for me, politically, I think that has to do with representation, and it does matter. We always talk about the grief of politics and how people look at it, and when people see themselves in that role, it does matter, to be like, "Oh man, I can do that."
Right, and you hear interviews all the time of different people who are like, I specifically think of The Little Mermaid, having an African-American gal cast to play Ariel in the live-action Little Mermaid, and people are all up in arms. But then there's that flip side of it, the video that went viral of that mom with the little girl, the black gal.
Yeah, and,
who was
and her
like
daughter,
crying because they were like, Ariel looks like me.
Yeah, and I think she was 6 inches from the screen, and she didn't blink the whole time. She was just staring at Ariel.
Right. So there's that power of representation that we don't necessarily think about. Like I think you shared a video with me specifically about Aragorn being drawn as black.
Oh yeah.
And I go back and forth on it, right? Because it's an established character that we already know and love, that already has a very clear description. I don't know, however, I don't remember in Lord of the Rings, like reading through it, if Tolkien ever described Aragorn's skin tone. Yeah,
I mean, I would have to go back and read. I don't really know. The one thing I always counter to that, and this isn't like a really big negative, but it's one thing I always think about, it's like a quote of a quote, but basically a long time ago, there was a writer. It's been quoted a lot. There was a guy who wrote novels like in the 1920s. Okay. And they were actually going to option his novel back in the day for like a nickel, probably the way it was back then. And they were going to make a movie about it. And they did, and it was vastly different than his novel. And so people came up to him afterwards, and this has been quoted by several people, so I actually don't know who the original person was, but I've seen it so much, it's like ingrained in my brain. People came up to him after and said, what happened to the movie? It's not even like your books, Mm-hmm. And he said, "You know what? I don't care. My books are there. You can go get my book. You can read my book. The characters are as they are in that book. Mm-hmm. I've read that stuff." But he said, "My books are my books. You can go read my books, or you can watch the movie. Like, it doesn't bother me. I got paid for them to option it. I'm still going to go writing books." And so I think about that a lot when people are like, "But that's not how the character is." It's like, I've seen amazing art for Lord of the Rings. All those artists, I can go buy those books and look at that art and go, "This is my Aragorn, or this is my Legolas, or whatever." Right. Or I can look at the Magic cards and go, "Yeah, that guy looks awesome." It's that's the beauty of art, I think. And
I really think though, like, kind of getting back to our main topic of the idea of woke road, this is an area where, not even conservatives, just general kind of mass America, you get people that maybe have a more conservative leaning but wouldn't necessarily consider themselves to be conservative or Republican. Maybe they consider themselves independent, but they get really frustrated because they, again, will look at this without knowing the backstory of the artist for that card was African American. Yeah. And so, in his mind, because Aragorn isn't described that way, that's how he imagines Aragorn. Because that's how he grew up, and that's his world, and that's what he knew, right? So that's how he draws it, and it turns out it's great art. Wizards is like, "Hey, cool, we had like 3 other artists make it. This is the one we want to go with."
Yeah.
So, right, that backstory now, and you're like, "All right, cool. Like, that's how he envisioned it." They went through and they liked that one. But there's a flip side of that where they go, you don't care. You just want a virtue signal. Like you just want to be out there.
Yeah.
And
like
and
Magic wants to be the one to be like, yeah, look how, progressive we are or whatever, and it's
Yeah.
like me, I'm just like, that art is awesome. Like some of the shots, like they have a couple of like,
But there's a lot of people who go, that's not Aragorn to me. That's
Yeah.
not how I know Aragorn. That's not how Aragorn has ever been represented to me. So, like, why are you messing with this thing that I love? We've talked about it ad nauseum on this podcast, right? Like,
I think we did. I think we didn't record it. I think is the thing is we always talk about it on the phone and stuff. Maybe.
I don't know.
I'd
If
have to clip out the.
If we have, I'm sorry, people.
Yeah, we're gonna go over it again.
We're doing it again. But the thing is it's like, this is the thing that I love. Why are you messing with this thing that I love? And because people love these things, like they are so connected to these characters, these storylines, they get really upset. And I think of Star Wars, right? Like if you get rid of all of the other race stuff with Star Wars, the idea of making Luke like super guilty and kind of a pushover and not wanting to be the hero anymore after all of the stuff that he's done, as they did in the prequel or sequels here.
Yeah.
Most recently.
The postquels, I've
There's
heard
a
them called.
reason that people are so upset about it. It's because they loved Luke in the original storylines, the
Right.
original movies, right? Like they loved that character and who he was and who he represented. And then Disney was like, we're just going to rip your heart out. Like,
Yeah.
you love this character, but we want to go our own way and smash this character because we want to do something edgy.
Well, I think after all the dust settled on that, I think everybody just realized there was no plan. I think was the thing that like, and so I get less upset about that now. I mean, I don't like The Last Jedi, but part of me is like, oh, they were, as the old saying goes, putting the track down as the train was barreling down the station. So I don't really.
My point in that, though, is it's right. Like, if it's the same thing. It's the same visceral emotion, and I get really upset. And I think a lot of people get really upset when it's you're a racist, and
Yeah.
that's the de facto definition. You don't like a black Aragorn, you're racist. And I don't know why I'm making the liberal accuser here Southern, because the stereotype doesn't work. So maybe that's fun. I'm going to flip the stereotype on its head. You're going to be a hillbilly hick if you just blame someone for being racist when you have no evidence of it. Because that was so much of the backlash with Star Wars. Because people are like, I don't like Rose. Well, you're racist. You don't like Rose. Or you're misogynist because you don't like Rose. Well, no, Rose didn't serve a purpose in the story.
Yeah, I think that's true. Without getting onto the Star Wars tangent, that was true. But also, she did receive quite a bit of.
But she did,
Yeah,
which was
yeah.
a separate thing and should also be called out for what it is. And then you have Black Aragorn, okay, or Rings of Power where you have a black elf. It's fantasy, right? Like whatever, do what you want. The challenge is people are so deeply connected to what they know and how they know it. And then people get up in arms about woke culture because they see it coming from woke news organizations or organizations that they would label as woke. And that's where you end up now with this like uber exaggerated Ron DeSantis accusing everything of being woke.
I think with DeSantis, like again, we really should do an episode on it. I think with DeSantis is that he got in Florida, there was some successful stuff with that with like voters and things, right? So then he feels like he pushes forward.
Yeah, positive reinforcement.
Right, yeah. And then
when I lean in on woke because woke rubs people the wrong way and irritates them, then I get more attention, I get more votes.
Yeah, and then that in turn, it all bleeds into but I will say this: it seems like lately, I mean, I don't have the polls in front of me, but it seems like lately that nationally it isn't doing as well. Like people are kind of like nationally kind of getting burned out on like the woke thing that he's doing, So like, who knows if that's going to be able to fly in?
I mean, it gets tired after a while, right?
Yeah.
Like, where's
like
the substance?
that's what I was going to ask you. Are you tired of even conservative candidates bringing up a bunch, even though you feel different ways about it and stuff? Every time you hear, like, maybe they'll say it once, you're like, okay, but like,
it depends on where they're going, right? If they're just throwing the word woke out there, yeah, I get like, really, like, come up with something real.
Yeah.
Don't pander to me with this word thinking that it's going to stoke emotions. But when it's done in a way that actually specifically hits on a topic, it can still be used in a way that is going to, I'm not going to necessarily motivate my support for the candidate, but used in a way that's not going to be a turnoff to voting for them.
Yeah. Is there any candidate that you on the conservative side that you think is using woke correctly? Like, because I even think on the liberal side, for every liberal to say like, see how this is going, like, you know, they're just calling us woke and they laugh it off. It's like, no, but this is kind of effective. We need to pay attention to this. You know what I mean? Instead of shrugging it off, going, "Oh, he's woke," whatever, you know, or yeah, I'm woke. Like,
I can't think of any specific candidates that are using the phrase as an active part of their campaign.
Except for DeSantis, I think he's the only one.
Really, yeah. And honestly,
Well, Trump does, but Trump, I think, is mocking DeSantis when he.
maybe I don't follow Trump at all.
Yeah, well, he said like one thing, like at a rally where he said something about being woke, and I was like, oh, he did it one time, like where he.
I mean, again, I don't follow Trump. I don't understand how he's running, other than it's easy to feel an association of like he's being accused by all these people that I also feel are accusing me, and so I associate myself with him in that, because
Well,
not me personally, but that's just
well, it could be just the base feels that he's being attacked so much that they're being attacked, like the identity of, you know, that.
I mean, I don't even think that's the case. I feel that most conservatives, particularly Christian conservatives, but conservatives in general, I really feel like they're just broadly attacked by mainstream media across the board. Like, and the perfect embodiment of that was Hillary Clinton being perfectly okay to refer to conservatives as the box of deplorables.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like for a long time, conservative people in the United States have felt that that is how they are viewed by the left, and that is how they are viewed by left media and left organizations. And you see things like the Twitter files coming out, kind of how they're treated that way, and it's just confirmation. Like, see, I've been saying this for a long time, and here's the evidence that proves it.
Yeah.
And so,
well, you know, with the Twitter files, like we talked about the last episode or the 2 episodes ago with the corporate media, there was some bias there.
Right.
And I think, you know...
they didn't dig in deeper on it, but the point I'm getting at has nothing to do with what the Twitter files were. It's just that things like that are confirmation of here's how I feel. So when you look at Donald Trump and him getting indicted and everything coming across against him, and the left-leaning media has been against him from the very beginning, it's very easy to be like, I've been attacked in this way by the media. I've been viewed this way by people because of my opinions, and he is too, and so I associate with him in that regard, and so I'm going to, you know, support him because he shouldn't be getting attacked this way. And I feel like maybe that's why he still resonates so strongly with Republicans and conservatives, is because there's the way of looking at that. Like, I read an article you and I talked about.
We should really put up our phone calls, because if we're ever on vacation or whatever, that could just be an episode of our phone call, me like cutting our phone calls together, and like the Zoom calls we make to each other, and just putting it like the Christmas time episode of like, hey everybody, like,
here's a supercut of all of our random phone calls. Enjoy, folks.
Yeah, this is from this day, blah blah blah. Yeah.
So, like, again, I mean, if Trump is mocking DeSantis using woke, I wouldn't in any way, shape, or form be surprised, but I'm not following him. Nor do I follow DeSantis, right? Like, I don't see them as respectable candidates. And sorry, conservative folks, if you feel that way, but, you know, I
think a lot of conservatives agree with you. Like, DeSantis is not polling well, and
I think a lot of conservatives agree with me on that, but I mean, statistically, the Republican Party is still broadly supporting Donald Trump, and so I might be ticking off a lot of people on that. But, you know, personally, I think the argument that you know, it's a witch hunt isn't true. I think there is more than enough smoke to prove that there's fire. And the counter argument, well, they never went after Hillary, they're just hunting him down, doesn't play with me. I'm sorry, but if your kid made that argument because Johnny across the street burned down a house, I can burn down a house too.
Yeah.
It's not how it works.
I mean, we said it last episode too. If they got someone Hillary, just do it, man.
Right.
Just go get her.
Hold your party and hold your candidates accountable, right?
Yeah.
And we want respectable leaders, but I don't think Trump is a respectable leader. I think he's a crook and a criminal and a con artist, and he's gotten away with it his whole life, and he's finally gotten cornered because he was dumb enough to run for president and make himself the center of attention.
Yeah.
And he can't help it. I've been reading more and more articles about how Trump can't shut his mouth and that is getting him in more and more trouble. And the most recent one I read said that the DOJ is antagonizing him. All these leaks of their evidence is really just because they want him to open his mouth and trip over his tongue even more.
Well, it worked.
That's the article. Like, it's a supposition. It's not a proven idea. But
I mean, I heard that theory early on, and I think, I mean, it makes sense that it would be true, and it's working. Because every time whatever, I think for me, like, is there a conservative candidate that you see nowadays that you're like, oh yeah, that's kind of like that's my candidate, you know? That's where
for all the Republicans that are currently on the ticket, probably the one that I'm most interested in right now is Chris Christie.
Yeah, that I just saw those clips from the town hall when he just was like, "What?" The town hall where he just, you know, what's with Trump type thing, and like he did this and he screwed up this. That was interesting. But what I thought was more interesting was there was like a religious dinner that he went to, and like Pence went to it. Like it's like a thing that every conservative person, like these are like Christian conservatives, right? Mm-hmm. And he started talking about Trump, and they booed him. And he literally, in the middle of his talking points about how bad Trump was, he said, I don't care. Why are you booing? And I just had to, you know, what was it? There was a movie where someone's like, why are you booing? It's like, it was like a parody of like, why are you booing? Like, I'm saying the true thing. I'm speaking. Why are you all booing at me? What is happening right now? Like, am I, you know, the Zoolander, am I taking crazy pills? Like, he just had this moment up there. He was like, what is happening? And I was like, wow. Like when he's like, no, we all know it's bad, and people are booing him. He's like, what is happening? Like,
because currently, when Trump got indicted for the documents, he started polling better.
Yeah.
Because he's a victim and he's being attacked, and it's a witch hunt, and they're out to get him, and no one is pausing long enough to go, wait, no, he's probably guilty. Like, the evidence they have against him is so bad. The article I was reading about the idea, the theory that the DOJ is just leaking this stuff so that Trump can talk about it and incriminate himself more. One of the things they outlined was the DOJ already had recordings. They already knew that Trump and, was it Natua?
Yeah, Natura. Yeah, I can never say his last name.
And the aide were moving stuff around. Like, they already knew. In the warrant, they already knew. But they still went in and like taunted him and like played like they didn't and let him incriminate himself even more. Like, you knew. That's flatly obstruction of justice. But
it's that old thing where they I've heard that old story about like they're trying to get somebody on hiding. Like you hear this story a lot. Like they're trying to get a mobster on like stealing money, and they're like, okay, we found the $5,000, and the dumb mobster will be like, 5? Should have been 20. They're like, you know, so it's there of like, hey man, we got one recording of you. He's like, you know, or like you said this one time. He's like, well, I was talking to him last week, and it's like, there you go, you know, like.
And honestly, like in this case, I just don't get how. I think everyone is just so much feeling this. It's one of my theories. I don't really have another good theory, but one of my theories is I think that's one of the big reasons why. People really resonate with Trump is because they see him as a victim, and then they also feel like they're victims of mainstream media and kind of society at large, right? Like, I think a lot of conservative Christians are really feeling attacked.
Yeah. I mean, I do understand that it, like we said, it goes in ebbs and flows. Like every political party has been the ire of the people, really, like the general electorate, you know? It happens all, like even me being on the left or progressive, like I wasn't excited when Hillary Clinton started to run, you know, that is so establishment that you're just like, all right. I mean, it's now with Biden too, it's getting to the point where it's like, you know, he's getting to the point where he's like saying like, what did he say the other day? Like we're doing well in Iraq or whatever. It's like really bad where you're just like, God. But like, again, Trump isn't that far off. And yes, Biden's age is a problem, and he can't stay on message, and he's incoherent. But like when you hear Trump just spitball policy, you're like, there's not that much breath between, you know, Trump winging it, not using a teleprompter, just saying gobbledygook, and Biden just not knowing what's happening. Right. It's like this kind of there's
maybe
not.
We could bring in a politician who's like under 70.
Yeah.
To be a candidate. So
even I was going to send it to you, but even Karl Rove wrote a op-ed in, I want to say it was a Fox or somewhere, maybe I think Wall Street Journal, but he wrote an op-ed about like, hey, both these guys are old.
Yeah.
And even Trump is what, 4 years off of Biden or what? Like, he's not much.
Yep.
So like, and then he started bringing in like history and ages of different people that like the youngest person we have running is 50, which is still pretty good.
Yeah.
But he brought it, and I was like, man, that's so true.
But, I don't feel bad about a 50-year-old president. In fact, I think that's a pretty good age, right? Like, you've got years of experience. You've seen a lot. You've done a lot. You've been able to prove yourself. You've been able to learn from your lessons. Like, 50 is a good age to be a leader of a country. But late 70s, like, same scenario, but now you're so far detached from the leading edge of what's going on. Like, can you have any understanding, one, but two, the cognitive capacity? I mean, just look at any speech from Biden.
Yeah, I mean, like Dianne Feinstein too is actually like really sad. Yeah. And on the left, they're like making her vote. It's like, let her. What are you doing?
Because they need to prove that she's still okay and still relevant. They can't, because if they show any weakness on that, then she's going to have to walk away. And they're all really probably with heart trying to sort of carry her through to the end of her term, but also maybe still get the votes out of her. But the reality of it is no Republican is ever going to win Diane's seat.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
So, right, like where she is located is so blue, there's no way Republicans are going to win.
Yeah, I mean, we watch Breaking Points a lot, and like Saga brought that up of like, just even Biden, like let him have that Hallmark movie moment where like he deserves it. Like, as much as I don't like Trump, just go away to Mar-a-Lago, just have fun, go to like it doesn't matter, just go crash people's weddings when they don't want you to crash their weddings, or do. I mean, I'm sure there's people that would be like, oh man, Trump's here, like it.
But like, so kind of coming back to the whole concept of like the right's viewing of woke versus the left's viewing of woke. I think by and large, everyone in culture is also coming to the same point that you're coming to with Biden, and a lot of liberals are coming to with Biden, and that you had already talked about too. Like, I'm kind of done with woke, and I think a lot of conservatives are getting there too. DeSantis is probably hammering it too hard, and you can only hammer a nail into a board so far before you're not doing any good.
Yeah, there's nothing left.
Right. So.
Or several nails in the same board when every time you say woke, there's nothing left.
So one of the articles we read was a Salon article. And I'm going to see if I can get it up here. It was written by D. Watkins, published February 8th of 2020. So this is before it had even really come forward. And it's an excerpt from a book.
Oh, yeah.
It's entitled Why I'm Sick of Woke Culture. And really, as an African-American activist, or at least I'm pretty sure that's the case. I didn't research the author, but from the way the article is written, or the excerpt is written, I get the sense that D. Watkins is an African-American activist, and really just also getting sick of like people are appropriating this like with good intention. African-Americans that are more affluent, that don't understand the life of poor African-Americans and the struggles of getting a mortgage and everything else. Like, he specifically calls that out. I don't understand, and they're taking this phrase, and that's why I don't like the phrase anymore. And he opens up the whole article opens up with him being at a local convenience store or something, or incense shop or whatever.
Yeah.
And the owner there is like, hey, I've got this like Stay Woke shirt.
Yeah. And he's like, ugh.
Yeah. And just how tiring it's become. And I really feel like maybe a lot of Americans are that same way. I feel like, conservatives feel like just society as a whole has gone so far into this exaggerated form of wokeness.
Yeah.
That the only weapon that can be used against it is someone like Trump, who's just going to be all in your face and 100% like, I'm just going to say all the things that everyone's uncomfortable to say.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, there's that, and that was actually the word I was trying to think of later that I couldn't, was the appropriation.
Right. When
like one group of people says, stay woke, or whatever, it's like, oh, that's a positive, like stay aware, stay whatever.
Yeah.
And then that gets appropriated by like the opposite thing of like, well, let's make fun of them. Just like SJW, like, yeah, I think I'm kind of an SJW. I try to be aware and read and care about people's rights and stuff. And like, oh, and now it's like, oh, you're an SJW.
Right.
It's like, okay.
Because it tips from I care and I want to do something better to the point of I just want the world to think good of me. I want everyone to know I'm a good person.
Yeah.
So again, use the word because I think it's a great descriptor of virtue signaling.
I think, yeah, and even with virtue signaling, I don't think it's always bad. Because sometimes when people virtue signal, they'll bring up something that you just weren't aware of, like a charity or an organization.
Well, but not by nature. Like to virtue signal in and of itself is falsely, at least in my interpretation, falsely presenting that you believe in this thing. And maybe you think it's a good thing or not, but not actually caring about it. Like just it's a very surface, like
I think it's something else that got
the tens of thousands of people that went to BLM protests that literally never did anything else afterwards.
Oh, you mean like that guy in Seattle that, like, shout out to that guy. The BLM protests were happening and Cheesecake Factory, the front window got smashed out and they were like there. Cairo or King was there. They were following people around the crowd. He dipped into Cheesecake Factory. White dude came out with a full peanut butter Reese's cheesecake because I've bought that before. I know what they look like. He pulled out and just walked away and I was like, he's not there for the other reason that people are supposed to. He's there to get that cheesecake, you know?
Right.
So
that's the difference between someone who actually cares, someone that should be labeled as a social justice warrior, someone who's willing to put their life, their finances, their comfort and their freedom on the line for something that they genuinely believe should be addressed versus someone who's going to a protest so that they can look good.
And get a cheesecake. I mean, that's my thing too, but the appropriation of that, if someone, like, would you consider if somebody came back from a BLM thing that, like, they're like, yeah, I was there, it was pretty crazy. I mean, is that virtuous signaling? I wouldn't consider that virtuous signaling, like.
What's the motivation behind it, right?
Oh.
Where's your heart stand in all of it, right? So that's one of the things that he talks about, right? Is like, okay, there's all these people. He talks about going to a protest, and there's people at BLM protest, and they're taking selfies, and they're wearing the hashtag BLM, Black Lives Matter. They're out there doing all that stuff, but none of them are doing anything. There's no action behind it. That was his call out. Is there's no action.
Right. Well, yeah, they you can crap on Vice all you want, and I've had problems with like some of their stuff, but they went on the street when it was like happening, and they went to Portland, which is like crazy. And they showed the BLM protest start like in the evening. They'd come out every evening, bullhorn, African Americans, let's do this. This is what we need to do. We need to march to whatever. And then they just would pan the camera over, and you just see people lighting stuff on fire trying to climb the police station. And the people down the block are like, what are you guys doing? We're over here trying to, because they were literally in the Vice footage saying, this is what we want. Here's what we want from the community.
Right.
So they're like, okay, so they have demands.
But then that other thing, because it's extreme, is what takes over the media narrative.
It did. And that's what everybody saw in the news.
Yep.
I remember, we had what was that, Chad in Seattle?
Yeah.
The thing in Seattle?
No, Chaz.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know what was going on there. I heard crazy things. But I was in Portland working. And like halfway through the day, the guy goes, where you? Because I was like, I got to get back early or whatever. He goes, where are you out of? And I said, Seattle or Tacoma or whatever. And he goes, wow, that Chaz thing's nuts. What's going on? I was like, well, to be honest, I don't know. I don't go up there. And I go, what's going on in Portland? He goes, okay, well, I don't know either. Like, I don't, like, it was like, yeah. He's like, I don't go there. Like, I'm not going to, he's like, you got a point. Like, yeah, I'm not going to go there. And I was like, yeah, I don't honestly know.
Right.
So,
I mean, in Portland made a lot of news because there was a lot of damage to buildings and structures, and the protests were very violent and aggressive. Chaz started out that way and then made a lot more news later as so that kid got shot and they wouldn't let the cops in.
Yeah, I heard about that.
A lot of other stuff along those lines was going on. Neither situation was good. Yeah. And again, how much of that is actually people that are legitimate activists that are out there for a cause trying to affect change,
right? Because
they see something in society that needs to be addressed and isn't being addressed, right. Versus how much of that is people that are just out there that are just upset with the system as a whole. They're not happy with where their life is, and so
the cheesecake guy is like the perfect example.
And I go back historically, right, and I think of a lot of Germans pre-World War II, kind of as Hitler was coming into power, that were like, oh, there's my scapegoat. I'm going to blame the Jews, who kind of get sucked into it because they're upset and they're angry, and there's a charismatic leader standing in front of them who's pointing at
It's so crazy how pervasive that
Right.
is. I was actually listening to an interview with a professor who taught conspiracy theories and like the origins. And the host was Jewish. He said, "Okay, so where do the Jewish people where do the Jews come in, basically?" And he said, "Well, it's like everywhere. But historically, like some of that stuff started because in early Christianity, Christians weren't allowed to handle money. They considered it dirty or whatever. So then other people in those communities, Jewish people, were like, well, we want jobs. We want to be part of this community, whatever. We'll be bankers, like we want to work. And so then that's just this pervasive idea of like, it always turns around and like, Hitler, look what they're doing to our money and our banking system. And it's like, come on, man. Like that's old stuff. Like that's the thing with conspiracy theories. Sometimes I think like there's nothing new here. Like there's no new conspiracy glean to it whatsoever. It's all just, let me guess, it's Jewish people. Gotcha. Like that's like the newest thing about conspiracy theories. And some of that is like, I think turning it back to woke, like some of that I think is rooted in like othering people of other communities and stuff of like, well, they're different, and I think it's only a matter of time until that stuff turns around to like, I mean, people can't really see the quiet part out loud now, but some of those people in those parties in the Conservative Party are very, very, I mean, they're racist. And so they're saying stuff, dog whistling stuff, I think, out loud about like those communities where you don't even know if it's true or not. You're like, okay, well, you're just trying to like signal to your people. I think that's one thing I find interesting about the conservative movement now with like Trump's base, right? You can only bring that base so much. And I think what's happening is, they're really starting to reach out into like, to use the word, really deplorable places to be like, where else could we get votes? And then these people start coming up and posting pictures on social media that they're like Nazis and stuff. And you're like, guys, this isn't a good look, like it, and Ben, like I watch Ben Shapiro, he's traditionally Jewish. He wears a yarmulke every episode. He's called people out for being racist. You're like, well, you guys kind of like the whole party kind of opened the door to these people because you needed votes, but it's like, what do you?
But there's no accountability in the party, right?
Yeah,
and it's the same thing with Democrats, right? Like they're willing to take the votes. They're not going to the same deplorable places, but they're still just really after votes. Like they honestly, at the end of the day, don't really care. That's how Biden got nominated. That's how Hillary was going to well, we're just gonna chase the votes, and so we're going to bring up this really sort of boring, middle of the road,
milk toast idea.
Yeah.
I'm Obama 2.0, and you're
Right.
like, well, I mean, the appropriation of that again that I think affects people though is yes, if there was a problem with voting or whatever, we needed to tighten that up. But at the same time, I think the conservatives nowadays have swung the other way. We had an episode on voting and how they're trying to restrict that. And there was audio after our episode posted of some well-known conservative like speaking to a banquet of like, we need to take drop boxes away so we make it harder for people to vote. And these are like college kids that are like registered voters.
Like we just had the Supreme Court make the decision where they kind of handily shut down, was it South Carolina's new challenge that was basically saying it's the state's decision how we're going to set up our districts.
Yeah.
And the federal government was like, for federal elections, no.
Yeah,
It's
we
a
might be
federal
talking
election.
about the Supreme Court in a couple episodes because they, I think you and I talked on the phone that they rammed about 4 incredibly historic, like groundbreaking decisions into like a 3-week period and then pieced out for their session.
Yeah.
And it's like, ugh, like that. We could have 4 episodes just digging through all this.
And we're done.
Yeah, and we're done. And I lost all your emails, and I'm going off to an island where no one could talk to me, and I'm throwing my phone in a river.
Right in the middle of the Clarence Thomas and Alito controversy and everything else that's going on. And, that was, for conservatives, that was kind of a pretty heavy indictment on sort of that notion to restrict voting. And it was, I think, the only conservative side of any of those decisions that actually lost. The other ones, I think, all won on pretty heavily divided lines.
Yeah.
But the gerrymandering, the district setting case was like 8-1.
Yeah,
or
I think
7-2.
I think it's good too because I mean, Democrats, liberals as well do gerrymandering,
Right.
So it's like for them to put their foot down and go, no, nobody.
Right.
But yeah, so I mean, the thing with me with woke is, I mean, to me, it seems like the left is taking it too flippantly. Like maybe not, we'll make fun of the word work. Yeah, I'm woke, blah, blah, blah. But I think we really need to pay attention to those candidates that are using that language on the conservative side to be like, we need to watch how this person's using this language, and it's not funny. I think there is some progressive podcasts that I just stopped listening to because they were a little bit smug, and it's like, guys, or I'll listen to very, I don't know, passively kind of, because it's like, no, this stuff is serious. Like, just because you had a certain education and you think this person made a funny gaffe, like
Kind of like how I feel about valuetainment on the other end of that spectrum. Like, I just can't.
Well, you know what my thing
It's
was
almost a caricature.
my thing with valuetainment that I figured out was that, again, with our Curb Media episode, we talked about bias. And I think I just realized, like, oh, their thing is they're investment guys. Like, they know about real estate, investment. So they're trying to hold on to as much money as possible. So I get that they're having people on their show to be like, here's what I think a good tax rate is, 90% or whatever. And no matter what you think about those ideas, it's like, well, you want to hear this person out. But at the end of the day, this isn't a debate where at the end you're like, oh man, that's
Right.
You're just like, okay, you're a good person and I enjoy talking to you. I mean, PBD said that several times.
Yeah, he's not, well, I mean, he gets pretty defensive and a little bit verbal, but
With
elevated.
The military, definitely, because he's a veteran.
But, he's not a giant jerk to people.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to change his mind. I think there's a lot of talk about platforming nowadays, like who should you platform, who shouldn't you platform, and I think the idea of, I think I heard actually a progressive I really like. I'll send you some of his stuff. Sam Cedar, he's been doing his show for a long time. He was with Air America that went out years ago, like in the early 2000s, and he's got his own show on YouTube now where he basically does the same radio show for like 4 hours just on YouTube and does all that.
About it.
Yeah, but I liked his thing is he said, some of these shows, you're not going to change the host's mind really, and you're not going to change my mind because I've thought this way for a long time. And although new ideas come, I'm still in the same wheelhouse of having progressive views or whatever. He said, my philosophy is, if there's one viewer who's listening to Valuetainment or whatever and goes, wait a minute, like, he has a point. Like, I'm not really seeing eye to eye with PBD on this. And he goes, and maybe that person reads a book or maybe just starts watching our show for like another perspective. He goes, that's what I am there for, is seriously the one person that flips, that says, oh,
Or
like
someone who actually has a deeper understanding of what's going on and maybe has a higher level of empathy.
Yeah.
Which in our current society is just, I don't know if there is a way where we can grow that bone in our society. Like, how do we feed that to be bigger in our society? Because right now we are just losing empathy for the other side.
Yeah. I think for me, like, to bring it back to the woke thing, it kind of just washes over me like sunlight at this point. Like, I'm just like, all right, well, if you want to talk, like, the conversation you're having, if a friend asks me, like, it's like, this is what I think. But I'm not going to, when I hear a politician especially use that phrase, I'm, one, not going to be offended, and two, just be like, yeah, I guess, like, go for it, man.
Because DeSantis is the one who's like just keeping it in the conversation so much and driving it forward and really keeping it alive. And yes, a lot of conservative media is still using the phrase, and I think for good reason. But I really think it's kind of coming to me sort of like the left using the word Nazi to describe anyone on the right. Because, even like, oh, you're pro-life, you Nazi. Like, what? Like, do you even know what that means?
Yeah.
And I think kind of woke is sort of becoming that way for me too.
Yeah.
Where it's just sort of the catch-all pejorative to describe someone on the left.
Yeah, even Nazi is outdated because you say neo-Nazi now. Like, the Nazi was a specific place and time in history. Now, Nick Fuentes is a neo-Nazi. He thinks the Holocaust didn't happen, talks about how terrible Jewish people are all the time. He is a neo-Nazi. If somebody calls him a neo-Nazi, you're like, yeah, that guy's a neo-Nazi. People around him, but, like, he is a neo-Nazi. So, like, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of that way too with Nazi. It's like, no, they're not a Nazi. They're just, they're really getting a whiff of that fascist tendency of book burnings, whoever. It depends on who you're talking about. But
right.
People that are like, I want to ban books, I want to do this. You're like, that's a little fascistic. Like, Germany wasn't the only place to do that, but they definitely got the most.
And the irony of it is you're getting upset about restriction of ideas and thoughts.
Yeah,
and yet the progressive left is all about restricting ideas and thoughts. Like, we can't talk about that. That's offensive.
Yeah.
Well, you might hurt someone's feelings.
Yeah, and the conservatives are doing it when they're like, let's ban books, and then you can't indoctrinate my kids. It's like, why? Just because I want to talk about Pride Month? Like,
right.
That's not
exactly.
Exactly. So it's like a snake eating its own tail. A blue, white, purple snake eating. I don't know what color. But yeah, we're almost done. But yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed the episode. If you want to write to us at gwgpodfellows@gmail.com. Write in the description what episode you're asking a question about or whatever, and we'll incorporate it in the next episode. Do you know what you're going to talk about next episode? Because it's your choice to choose. If you see the blue border around the video, you'll see that's because it was my choice. That's something I'm going to try. I'm going to make one for Avin. So when it's his choice, we'll border him. But yeah, so I actually like this. We kind of got off topic, but I kind of liked actually doing it in person and like the energy and stuff.
Probably a little bit of how we ended up off topic though, is because we are just sitting here.
We're so excited. Well, we don't see each other that much.
Joe!
You live far away from me. I live far away from you. We can see each other. It's not impossible. It's just not convenient. We can't just drive over. We're not
over an hour long drive. It's gotta be planned. Got to talk to the wives.
Yeah, we got
coordinate.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. But the setup's not bad, I think.
No,
it looks good.
So let us know what you think, obviously, on the new setup.
Yeah.
No, I don't know what I want to talk about next time. Maybe we'll come back to the Supreme Court. We've got a few other things that we have lined up, so maybe we'll come back to those.
Yeah, I think we do have to talk about Ron DeSantis at least before November.
Yep.
Because he is running. And I find the more I find out about him, I don't want to vote for him. And it doesn't seem like I think people feel the same way I do. They're not obviously going to vote for him. But it seems like people are actively being disinterested in him. In fact, he gave an interview on Fox News where the host literally asked him, like, are you going to see these returns in polling? Like, very, very passive way to say, nobody likes you, man. Like, it was like, wow. Like, the guy's just kind of saying that on Maine.
He was doing really good when he was kind of coasting on Trump's coattails, but then Trump came in, and he can't be the Trump 2.0 that he was trying to frame himself as.
Trump is incredibly narcissistic and talks a lot of crap, but every time he brings up DeSantis, everything he said it's like, yeah, you did help him out, and he did get elected off of you. After that, I don't know, because like I said, Trump talks a lot of crap, but like, yeah, DeSantis owes a lot to that. Yep. So it's crazy.
Yeah. He obviously will not be the Republican nominee. I don't think Christie's going to be the Republican nominee, but right now he's the one that I'm like, oh yeah, almost positive it'll be Trump, unless something happens, he gets indicted and actually goes to jail and he can't run. There's nothing that says you can't. Well, I don't know. Are you able to run if you have a felony conviction?
I mean, we're about to find out. Like, I think there's going to be some legal scholars that'll be talking about that lately.
I think we're going to get a repeat of the 2020 election, right? Like, as long as the Democrats can put up someone who's not incredibly abrasive and incredibly threatening to the swing voters, the 10% that sit in the middle that really do go back and forth, right? The bases of both are going to vote for their own. Nothing's going to change. If they've got a D next to their name, 40% of Americans are going to vote for that person. 40% of Americans are going to vote for the R. Doesn't matter. If Trump is the nominee and Democrats put up someone who's not controversial, who's just sort of, as you described earlier, kind of milquetoast, someone who's closer to the center, I fully expect that person's going to win because they're not Trump.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, I think that's it this month. We will talk to everybody next month, and, have a good month.